He looked at me as if I were a ghost. "You must be the wife," she whispered, and I knew my 50 years of marriage were a facade. Thomas, my husband, had been sending this woman $320 for 42 years. I thought of betrayal. But when she opened the wooden box and showed me the black and white photo, I discovered that the truth was much worse. The pain he hid nearly destroyed us. Have you ever stopped to think that the weight of an entire life might be contained in a single, small, forgotten object? I was 75, and I found out mine was in a crumpled brown envelope under a mountain of old socks. I am Margaret Ellison, but you can call me Maggie. And if you, like me, are over 50, perhaps you understand what it's like to look back and feel that your story is written in permanent ink. For Thomas, my husband, and me, this story took place in Seattle, Washington, where the smell of sea air and the persistent fog seemed to guard all our secrets. Married for nearly 50 years, golden anniversary approaching, a life that seemed scripted by peace. But listen carefully. Peace is often just the silence that hides the war. Who am I? A woman of my generation. I married at 25, full of dreams of building a safe home. Thomas was my anchor, methodical, an accountant with a precision that, I used to joke, could predict the weather. We never had children. A silent wound that Thomas carried with a stoicism that always seemed, somehow, distant to me. Our lives were made of routine. Breakfast at 7:15 a.m., crosswords in the evening, and Thomas's immutable ritual. And this is where the story of you, who are watching me, begins to intersect with mine. Because Thomas's ritual was our great open secret. Every first business day of the month, rain or shine, Thomas would put on his gray wool coat, the one that smelled of mothballs and old promises, and go out. It wasn't for work. He only took one thing, a thick, brown envelope that never returned. I swallowed this ritual for over 4 decades. In the early years, I asked, of course. I tried gently. "Where are you going so early, dear? Do you need help?" Thomas's answer was always the same, spoken in that deep voice that brooked no argument. "It's a favor, Maggie. Nothing for you to worry about. Just trust me." And as the woman I was taught to be, I trusted. I swallowed the curiosity, the small knot in my stomach, and the subtle pang of exclusion. We believe that love is this unquestionable gift. But the truth, my friends, does not respect age, nor years of marriage. The truth has its own time. The truth arrived on a damp Tuesday 2 years ago. Thomas, with his military precision, failed. He was in a hurry. His coat was hanging up. But the envelope, the brown envelope, with the folded money visible through the thin paper and the distinctive smell of currency, was on the white marble kitchen counter. My 75-year-old heart, which should have been beating at the calm rhythm of old age, raced as if I were 20 again. I approached slowly. It wasn't snooping. It was an irresistible force. And then I saw Thomas's strong, elegant handwriting used to sign checks and contracts, and a single name written in blue ink, Eleanor. No last name, no sender's address, just Eleanor. In that instant, the floor vanished beneath my feet. The suspicion I had buried for 42 years erupted like volcanic lava. $320 a month for 42 years. What he called just a favor now had a face, a woman's name. And it wasn't a favor. It was a silent betrayal. That night, the roast beef dinner tasted like ashes. The silence in our living room was thicker than the Seattle fog. Thomas was reading the newspaper, his brow slightly furrowed, feigning normalcy. I knew I couldn't put it off. I took a deep breath, feeling my hands tremble as I picked up a dirty plate. "Thomas," I began, and my voice sounded surprisingly firm. "Who is Eleanor?" The sound of my question was too loud. He didn't just stop reading, he stopped breathing. The newspaper slipped and fell to the carpet. His face turned gray, not pale with fright, but grayish, as if all the blood had been drained. It was an expression I had never seen in almost half a century. It wasn't anger, it was dread, the dread of an exposed man. "Maggie, please, don't start," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. He got up from the table with clumsy haste, leaving his food untouched, and he turned his back. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step sounding like a hammer blow to my chest. In that moment, He wasn't Thomas, my gentle husband. He was a stranger carrying a weight he wouldn't allow me to touch. That gesture ignited a feeling in me that I hadn't felt since my youth. Fear. The sharp fear that the person who shared my name and my bed was, in fact, living a parallel life, hidden in the shadows of the monthly $320. The next day dawned gray, perfectly in sync with my soul. Thomas left early, as always, under the pretext of work matters. But this time, the routine wasn't comfort. It was a camouflage for his lie. His car hadn't even turned the corner onto Redwood Avenue, and I was already heading up the stairs. In 50 years of marriage, I had never invaded his privacy. Respect? No. It was fear of the truth. But now, respect had been shattered by the weight of suspicion. I was no longer seeking respect, but answers. My hands trembled, not just from age, but from the icy urgency that moved me. The target was the filing drawer in the office, which Thomas kept locked with an antique padlock. I knew where he hid the key, in a small blue ceramic vase on the bookshelf. A hiding place he thought was clever, but which revealed his presumption that I would never dare. The padlock clicked. The smell of aged paper and dust invaded my nostrils as I opened the drawer. The sound of my heart was so loud it seemed to echo off the silent walls of the house. I rummaged through stacks of tax papers and old notes, looking for something, anything, that would explain the cowardice in Thomas's eyes. And then I found it. They were old, yellowed bank transfer receipts. The initial date was 1979, proof of remittance detailing an exact payment of $320, month after month, undeniable. But the most disturbing thing of all was a bundle of torn letters meticulously stored beneath a pile of old invoices. Thomas had tried to destroy them. They were cut into strips and amateurishly glued back together, almost desperately. He couldn't quite get rid of them. I picked up the letters, feeling the roughness of the paper. All were signed simply E. I read the phrases I could piece together as if assembling a nightmare jigsaw puzzle. They were pleas, thanks, confessions of despair. But one sentence, written in shaky female handwriting, repeated itself in several of them, piercing my chest. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up. Give up on what? On whom? Fear gave way to certainty. Thomas's secret was real, and it was deep. It wasn't a one-night stand. It was a 42-year commitment that he had hidden. Paranoia began to erode what was left of my reason. I looked at Thomas, sitting at the head of the table that night, and he turned into an enigma I couldn't decipher. Was he my Thomas, the gentle grandfather who did crosswords? Or was he the traitor who kept another woman, another life, hidden under the cloak of the monthly $320? The loop of tension consumed me. Why did he tear up the letters but keep them? Why $320? What is so terrible that Thomas preferred to risk our marriage than tell me? False hopes that it was just a distant relative dissolved before the intimate signature and the passionate thanks. I couldn't live in ignorance anymore. I had to go beyond the cut words. The last trace of evidence I found was in an old pocket calendar, hidden in the lining of his winter coat. An address, not in Seattle, but in a small town 3 hours' drive away, Silverton, Oregon, a place Thomas had never mentioned. The pain of uncertainty was more paralyzing than the pain of truth. I had to go. There was no other option. My whole life depended on it. I didn't leave a note. I just grabbed the keys to our old sedan, put $200 in my wallet, and left. The car journey was long and silent. The radio was off. The fog was starting to settle, and the rain fell in heavy, dramatic drops, washing the Oregon landscape, but unable to cleanse the knot of betrayal in my throat. I wondered who this Eleanor was. Thomas's mistress? A second family? What justified 42 years of silent lies? The GPS finally announced, in its robotic, indifferent voice, "You have arrived at your destination." Silverton was smaller and more forgotten than I imagined. The address led me to a side street, darker and more abandoned. I stopped in front of a small, almost dilapidated house. The paint was peeling. The yard was a sea of weeds. There was a faint smoke rising from the chimney. I turned off the car and sat there, the air trapped in my lungs. Getting out of the car required more courage than I thought I had. Finally, I opened the door, smelled the wet earth and wood smoke. I walked the loose stone path to the porch. My legs were stiff, and the knock I gave on the door sounded weak, hesitant. No one answered. I knocked again, harder, and then the door creaked open. A frail woman stood there. She wore a worn flannel robe and thick socks. Her white hair was disheveled, and her eyes, which must have been bright, were deep and opaque, carrying the weight of a perpetual sadness. She stared at me for a long moment. There was no surprise on her face, just a resigned weariness. It was as if she had been waiting for me her whole life. "You must be the wife," she whispered, and her voice was just a breath. The air left my lungs. The knot in my throat exploded into silent tears that couldn't even roll down my wrinkled face. That moment was the climax of my 75-year life. The betrayal had a face. Friends, if this story of Maggie and Thomas, where decades of betrayal and secrecy are revealed, is holding your attention, I need your help so more people can discover this truth. Like the video now to show how important this journey of revelation is. Subscribe to the channel to not miss any stories of overcoming and human drama. And activate the notification bell to be the first to know when the next part goes live. The truth behind Eleanor's life and the $320 envelope is about to be revealed. Are you prepared for what Thomas truly hid? Eleanor invited me in, and every step I took into the small old house in Silverton was a funeral for my 50-year life. The interior was simple, bordering on poverty. The smell was of old disinfectant and loneliness. There was no luxury, just the basics of forced survival. In one corner, I saw a rocking chair covered by a faded blanket, suggesting a stagnant life. We sat at the small kitchen table, the faint light from the dirty window barely illuminating the room. I stared at her, unable to articulate any accusation or question. Only the word "why" echoed in the emptiness of my mind. Eleanor seemed to read my thoughts. Her voice, still hoarse, carried the gravity of someone who had waited a long time for relief. "I've waited a long time for this day, Maggie," she said, her eyes fixed on the table. Not to get rid of the secret, but for it to become someone else's secret. My whole body trembled. I suddenly felt the overwhelming weight of my 75 years crushed by the magnitude of that moment. I was ready for the confession of an affair, for the description of a double life. I was armed for anger. Eleanor slowly got up and returned with an aged wooden box. It was covered in dust and looked like something that was not touched, but revered. She placed the box on the table and, with ceremonial care, opened it. Inside, there were only a few objects: a pair of baby shoes, a small worn teddy bear, and a photograph. Eleanor pushed the photo towards me. The black and white image showed a young Thomas with a thin mustache, smiling his characteristic crooked smile. Beside him, Eleanor, with a fresh, happy face. And between them, a baby. A baby with big eyes and Thomas's same crooked smile. My heart stopped. The silence in the house was deafening. I looked at the photo, then at Eleanor, then at the photo again. The logic of betrayal imploded. That wasn't a current mistress. It was something that existed before me. He had a child? I whispered, my voice destroyed, my throat burning. Eleanor just nodded, and tears finally came to her wrinkled face. "Our son, David," she said, her voice broken by the still living pain. "He died at 4 years old. A rare illness. We never had the resources to pay for the treatment. Thomas tried. He sold everything. He did everything he could." She paused, taking a deep breath, regaining the control that had kept her standing for decades. "Thomas and I, we were very young. We separated when David died. The pain was too great for us to stay together. But Thomas never let go of the guilt. He knows the house fell into disrepair and I got sick later. The money, the $320, is what he pays to ensure I don't starve. I was paralyzed. My tears finally came, but they were not tears of jealousy or anger. They were tears of overwhelming compassion, a pain I never knew Thomas carried. "But why did he never tell me?" I asked, my voice choked. Her answer was the final blow, the one that cut my soul. "Because you were always the love of his life, and he was afraid. Afraid you would suffer his pain. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of tainting the life he built with the woman who finally gave him peace. That day, I cried. I cried for that woman's pain, for Thomas's pain, for the grief of a son I never knew existed, and most importantly, I cried to realize that sometimes the truth is not a betrayal, but a scar my husband carried alone, thinking he was protecting me. The drive back to Seattle was different. The rain had stopped, and although the road was dark, the fog inside me had dissipated. I drove slowly, absorbing the magnitude of the pain Thomas had carried for 42 years. He wasn't a traitor. He was a survivor who sacrificed the truth for the protection of his wife's happiness. Upon arriving home, Thomas's sedan was in the garage. It was almost 11 p.m. The door was unlocked and the living room light was on. I walked in, and Thomas was sitting on the old velvet sofa, his head bowed. He wasn't reading. He was motionless, like a condemned man awaiting the final sentence. He knew I had gone to Silverton. He didn't ask anything. I didn't say anything either. Silence was the only language left, but now it was a silence charged with understanding, not lies. I took off my wet coat, hung it on the hook, and sat next to Thomas on the velvet sofa. The smell of burning wood that had permeated my clothes in Silverton now mingled with the familiar aroma of Thomas's sandalwood and office paper. I could feel his body tense beside me, waiting. He slowly lifted his eyes. There was no longer the gray of dread. There was the red of desperation and exhaustion in his gaze. He tried to speak. His throat failed. Instead of words, what came out was a dry sob. I was there, the woman betrayed by the lie, but rescued by the truth. I went to Silverton, Thomas, I said, my voice surprisingly calm and gentle. I spoke with Eleanor. I know about David. Thomas just closed his eyes, and tears streamed, uncontrollable, down his bearded face. Thomas began to cry. But it wasn't the cry of someone caught trying to defend himself. It was the convulsive weeping of a man who had carried an impossible weight for decades. The burden of a secret, the searing pain of a lost child, and the constant fear of losing the love that had saved him. He was crying for a lifetime of repressed suffering. And in that moment, he ceased to be my perfect, distant husband, the methodical accountant. He became the boy who lost a child and was left behind, frozen in time and guilt. I moved closer and without hesitation held his cold, trembling hand. "You haven't lost anything, Thomas," I said, squeezing his hand. "You haven't lost your marriage, and you haven't lost me. The truth hurts like hell, of course, but it also sets you free." Thomas turned and hugged me. Strong, desperately strong, as if it were the first time in 42 years that he could finally lean on someone. The smell of Thomas, the smell of home, flooded over me. He hugged me as if he were 30 again, and I felt like the Maggie of 30, only now, with the wisdom of 75. In that embrace, I felt the pain he had denied me out of love. I felt the absence of David, the guilt he carried for failing to save his son, and the terror of tainting our happiness with the tragedy of his past. That hug wasn't a confession, it was a liberation. It was our marriage being remade, not on the basis of perfection, but on the foundation of two imperfect souls who finally understood each other. We stayed there, for a time I couldn't measure. The silence between us was no longer one of secrecy, but of profound understanding. I discovered that the greatest proof of love is not the absence of secrets, but the ability to forgive what was hidden out of love. That night, Thomas and I did not sleep in our bed as husband and wife, but as two survivors. For the first time in decades, we slept without barriers or lies between us. The brown envelope almost destroyed my marriage, but it ended up revealing the greatest love of my life, the love for truth and the compassion for the scars my husband carried. From that day on, the first of the month ceased to be a solitary ritual of guilt and became a ritual of partnership. Thomas continued sending the money to Eleanor, who was a sick and frail woman, but now I accompanied him to the post office, no longer with fear, but with compassion. On our next visit, we brought Eleanor something she lacked, the dignity of being visited and remembered. And it was there, in that reunion of three people connected by the same pain, that I realized Thomas had not betrayed me. He had, ironically, honored me. He honored our home by protecting me from the pain he thought would destroy me. and I honored our love by forgiving the darkness he carried. Life continued in Seattle. The smell of sea air and fog still lingered, but now it was the scent of our new foundation, the truth. And I discovered that it wasn't Thomas's past that would save us, but our future, built on the courage to face the scars together. To you who watched us, especially to you who are over 45, hold on to this reflection. What have you been carrying alone for fear of losing the one you love? Forgiveness is not a gift for the other person. It is your liberation. It is the only thing that truly saves a marriage. The truth, no matter how painful, is the only foundation for a full life. Don't let the silence of a secret destroy the love you have built. Thomas's hug that night was the ground zero of our new marriage. There were no more silences about the past, only the mutual acceptance of life's complexity. The first loose end we needed to tie up was the relationship with Eleanor. The following week, we called Eleanor, not to ask about Thomas, but about her. She was shocked by my initiative, but her voice, though still fragile, carried palpable relief. For the first time in 42 years, the secret had been shared and transformed into mutual responsibility. Thomas and I traveled together to Silverton. Eleanor's house, which once seemed like a scene of tragedy, now received the light of our compassion. We were not rivals. We were two women who had loved the same man at different times in life, and who were now linked by the loss of a son we never knew existed. The $320 continued to be sent, but with a crucial difference. Now, it was not a guilt payment from Thomas, but our joint contribution to Eleanor's care. We found a social service in Silverton to help her. We discovered that Eleanor was not just physically ill, but carried a prolonged grief disorder, worsened by loneliness and guilt. Maggie, with her maternal instinct repressed by the lack of children, took responsibility for calling Eleanor every week. Slowly, conversations about health status and post office bureaucracy gave way to memories. Eleanor spoke about David, the son who lived only 4 years, with Thomas. And for the first time, Thomas could hear his son's name spoken aloud, without the shadow of fear. The true impact of this revelation was Thomas's internal healing. The weight he carried was the belief that his failure to save David made him unworthy of happiness. By telling me the truth, by crying in my arms, he allowed himself to be imperfect. He finally broke free from the role of protective traitor and became my Thomas again. I was also transformed. The pain of betrayal dissolved into compassion, and resentment gave way to admiration for his perseverance in caring for Eleanor, even after the breakup. At 75, I gained a new perspective. Life is not measured by the years without problems, but by the ability to face the deepest scars. There were no loose ends. Eleanor's secret was revealed, Thomas's suffering was shared, and Maggie's marriage was saved. Today, the routine in Seattle is the same, but the soul of the house is different. Thomas and I do crosswords holding hands, with no unsaid silences between us. The story of the brown envelope, which began as a nightmare of betrayal, ended as a saga of redemption. I discovered that true love is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to carry each other's pain. What took me 42 years to discover is the message I want to leave with you. There is no love that can withstand a secret, and there is no secret that can withstand forgiveness. If you love someone, love the whole person, their victories, their failures, and especially the scars they carry in silence. I am Maggie Ellison, 75 years old, and this is the story of how I fell in love with my husband for the second time, discovering that the perfect man I married was, in fact, an imperfect but incredibly brave man. If Maggie and Thomas's journey touched your heart and proved that forgiveness is the greatest form of love, I ask a favor. Give this video a like to show how much stories of redemption matter. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss any real and emotional stories. And tell me, what city are you watching from? Comment below with your reflection on Thomas's secret. Share this story. Someone might be living a secret they don't have to carry alone.